Jean Grey is an original member of the X-Men who has constantly been plagued by a great cosmic being. You can't think Jean Grey without thinking about her relationship with the Phoenix Force and all the moral gray areas that come with that issue. Regardless of whether or not Marvel Girl had control, countless people have suffered because of her interaction with the Phoenix, and someone has to answer for those crimes. Hello and welcome to the show with issues. I'm Auram, and like I said, someone has to answer for the Phoenix's crimes, so our goal today is to try Jean Grey in a court of law, and once and for all put an end to the whole affair. The Phoenix Force is a cosmic entity that has existed for an extremely long time. It's a force of life whose purpose is to burn away what doesn't work. What this comes down to is essentially the Phoenix's job being to eradicate what's become stagnant and is no longer evolving. So in the case of humans versus mutants, the Phoenix leans more toward the mutant side, but that's beside the point. When did Jean Grey come into contact with the Cosmic Firebird? On one fateful Christmas, Jean and her fellow X-Men were captured by a group of Sentinels created by Stephen Lang and were harbored to his space station. The X-Men punched their way out, as they do, but were met with a bigger problem. First, they had to find a way to get back to Earth, which Jean quickly remedied by reading the mind of a pilot. Everything seemed fine and good until they realized that they were in the midst of a solar radiation storm. They decided to push through to Earth with Jean shielding the ship until it proved too much to handle. Marvel Girl on death's door was reached out to by the Phoenix, who told Jean that she would die without its help. By accepting, the Phoenix said she would gain her heart's desire of saving her fellow X-Men. Jean decided to succumb to the Force, which placed her in a coma, allowing the Phoenix to take full control of her body. Phoenix placed the real Jean in the shuttle bay where she rested while Phoenix continued to act as Jean, stealing a portion of her consciousness. The shuttle fell to Earth, with everyone miraculously surviving. Phoenix then went on to live life normally with the X-Men, but slowly became corrupted by human emotion. After some Hellfire Club shenanigans, Phoenix, emotionally disturbed, transformed into Dark Phoenix, a force of power and destruction without a human conscience. This is where things get messy. The Dark Phoenix was hungry for power, so she fled to a nearby system where she absorbed the energy of a star, causing an explosion that killed billions of people. The Shi'ar, a nearby alien race, witnessed this and came to the conclusion that the Phoenix must die for her crimes against the universe. Professor X, not wanting to give up on Jean, challenged Lilandra, leader of the Imperial Guard, to an irrefutable Shi'ar duel for the fate of the Phoenix. Xavier chose his X-Men as his champions, with the Imperial Guard being Lilandra's. Everyone traveled to the blue area of the moon, summoned all the courage they required, counted to 10, and the duel commenced. Lilandra, losing, almost activated her Plan Omega, which would destroy the entire solar system. Phoenix realizes this and sacrifices herself to save everyone. Now, of course, this isn't the last we'd see of Jean Grey. Her original body that was back at the crash site soon woke up and lived her life without Phoenix influence, but that's not really what's important here. The Phoenix had taken the lives of literally billions of people, and it had to pay. This isn't something that would be truly dealt with in comics until the 2014 crossover event, The Trial of Jean Grey, but before we get into that, let's go over a little schism that was happening over at Marvel during the Phoenix saga. Sometime before Uncanny X-Men number 135 came out, Jim Shooter, then editor-in-chief of Marvel, looked at proofs for the issue and noticed the infamous scene of Phoenix destroying the Dabari system and killing billions. Shooter was perplexed by this, as it strayed from his original idea of Phoenix being the X-Men's Dr. Doom, so he decided to look at the next few issues in the series as well. He was agitated by what he found. Claremont and Byrne had written a compromise between the X-Men and Shi'ar to depower Jean and send her home. Shooter heavily disagreed with this decision, likening it to, quote, taking the German army away from Hitler and letting him go back to governing Germany, end quote. See, the way Shooter saw it, Jean Grey was the Phoenix. They weren't separate entities as Claremont and Byrne intended, they were simply one and the same. Shooter told Claremont that his ending didn't work and that he needed to come up with a new one. A few days passed and Claremont wildly suggested that they kill Phoenix permanently, but to his surprise, Shooter was 100% on board. So yeah, Phoenix was originally going to be depowered and sent back to Earth instead of sacrificing herself. Who knows how that would have changed things. But Phoenix killing herself is the ending we got, and that's really why she wasn't put on trial at the time. The Phoenix effectively died, leaving no one to answer for all those deaths in the first place. Of course, Jean did come back to life, but it didn't matter. She just died again a few years later. So what's going on in this Trial of Jean Grey event? Who is actually being put on trial if Jean Grey is twice dead? Well, it's simple. Jean Grey. Let me explain. After Avengers vs. X-Men and the tragic death of Charles Xavier at the hands of a Phoenix-influenced Cyclops, no less, Beast decided that he needed to do something to revive Xavier's dream of peaceful cohabitation between mutants and humans in the Eye of Cyclops. He attempted to accomplish this by bringing the original X-Men, Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, Angel, and Marvel Girl, to the present from the past, and have them confront Cyclops to show him what he's become. So that's who we're dealing with here, a time-displaced version of Jean Grey before she ever encountered the Phoenix Force in the first place. How did the trial start then? Well, it was actually a bit bit sudden. After relocating the team as a result of another crossover event, Battle of the Atom, Jean was kidnapped by the Shi'ar to finally answer for her crimes as the Phoenix. The Guardians of the Galaxy intercepted this and teamed up with the all-new X-Men to save Jean from trial. She's charged with genocide, and the whole thing is a back and forth between people saying she's guilty because she's still Jean Grey and will eventually be possessed by the Phoenix Force, and people saying she's innocent, seeing as she's not the Jean who was possessed by the Phoenix Force in the first place. This sort of pre-punishment is actually the crux of what's being dealt with in the new Civil War II event that's going on right now, but that's an entire video in and of itself. At the end of it all, Jean is convinced that she's totally guilty, which activates something new inside, a powerful new form that the original Jean never achieved, once and for all making her own person. The trial ends in a punching contest for the most part. Jean escapes during a recess, meets up with the rest of her team, and they all fight the Shi'ar, reminiscent of the original duel on the blue side of the moon in the Phoenix Saga. So the trial in the comics was kind of a bust. She was charged with genocide, and nothing really ever came of it except for some minor character changes and that new final form thing. So how would she fare in our court system today? Now, let's suspend disbelief for a second, say that mutants have the same rights as humans and that the entirety of the galaxy is tried in the same legal system, because otherwise this video would be half an hour of me talking on my ass. So at its simplest, Jean committed murder. Genocide, sure, but she killed billions, so that's what we're working with here. In US law, there are 4 types of murder: first degree, second degree, voluntary manslaughter, and involuntary manslaughter. Those first 2 are essentially killing with intent and some kind of premeditation, or at the very least were aware in the moments before that you were about to commit homicide. Manslaughter, whether it be voluntary or involuntary, are the crimes of passion or self-defense versions. Surprisingly, the Phoenix would probably be charged with involuntary manslaughter here. She didn't intend to kill all those people, she just had a thirst for power that she needed to quench that happened to kill billions of people. If this passed and she was proven guilty, the Phoenix would be facing a very high fine or up to 8 years in prison, which is actually one of the suggestions Shooter gave to Claremont after demanding a new ending be drawn up for the Phoenix Saga. Shooter thought it'd be interesting for the Shi'ar to depower Jean and imprison her, but Claremont disagreed, seeing as the X-Men would just never stop trying to save her. This sentence would probably make a lot of people upset, so if you're the prosecutor in this situation, you're gonna need to find a way to up the stakes. So how about a genocide charge? Surely that would present a bigger punishment, right? Well, unfortunately, Jean actually gets off scot-free here as well, if you can believe it. According to the Genocide Convention that came into effect on December 12, 1951, acts of genocide are only punishable if there is clear intent to commit the horrible act. So really, at most, Jean would be facing 8 years in prison, and hell, if she had a good lawyer, she could get that reduced even further. Jean could plead innocent, using an insanity defense, seeing as she was possessed by the Phoenix when these crimes were committed. In fact, one of the ways the US court tests for insanity is with the irresistible impulse test, wherein someone's mental state is deteriorated to the point that they felt an irresistible urge to do whatever they did. Instead of being sent to prison, she could be let out on probation or sent to some kind of mental institution. The Phoenix was hungry and simply satiated her irresistible needs. It really is scary to think that someone who commits an act so unimaginable can be back on the streets in less than 8 years. But what do you all think about this? Should the Phoenix have a more serious sentence for her crimes? Do you think the time-displaced Jean should have answered for her future self's misdeeds? Personally, I don't think Jean should really be punished for any of this. Sure, someone should pay for the genocide, but it was the Phoenix's doing, not Jean Grey. Although I do have the benefit of being the reader who knows that Jean's real consciousness was still alive somewhere. Let's have some discussion in the comments. That all being said though, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on anything I upload every other Wednesday and every Saturday. Oh, and of course, thank you so much for watching. Next time, I become the Phoenix.